Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive. Today we're tackling something pretty unusual. We're going to be looking at the idea of giants existing after the biblical flood, Noah's Ark, all that.
Oh yeah, this should be interesting.
Our source material this time is a YouTube video from Renner Ministries, and they filmed it on location at Mount Ararat in Turkey.
Wow, Mount Ararat.
Which they say is where Noah's Ark actually landed. They even show this massive rock with what they call a blood channel, and they believe that was Noah's first altar after the flood. Pretty dramatic, right?
Yeah, sounds like it.
And the video tackles a question that's, well, pretty fascinating. If the flood was meant to wipe out all the giants, how could they show up again later?
Yeah, that's a big question. It's something theologians have debated for, centuries, really. A real theological dilemma.
For sure. And it seems like even the guy in the video, he's a little unsure about it himself. At one point, he mixes up his biblical references. He mentions the verse about Noah building an altar, but he meant to talk about the verse describing giants before the flood.
Well, that slip-up is actually kind of interesting. It kind of highlights the whole problem the video is trying to address. The speaker seems genuinely confused about how giants could even exist after the flood.
Right.
Especially if the fallen angels who were said to have fathered them, if they were, imprisoned. He even brings up writings from some early Christian figures like Clement of Alexandria, Irenaeus, and Josephus. All these guys wrote about those pre-flood giants being the offspring of angels and human women.
So he's setting up the whole idea of giants, but then he can't really explain how they came back.
Yeah, exactly. He lays the groundwork, but then there's this missing piece.
In those early writings you mentioned, they describe some pretty wild stuff about the giants.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What kind of things did they say?
Well, like Clement talks about them having these immense bodies.
Okay.
And Irenaeus even says they were spreading these dangerous teachings about magic and what he calls sexual perversion. Basically, giants were this major source of evil in the world, according to them.
So they weren't just big. They were like bad news.
Definitely not the friendly giant type.
But then, if the whole point of the flood was to cleanse the world of these giants, how did they come back? The video doesn't really answer that, does it?
You're right. It doesn't really give a straight answer. Instead, it kind of shifts gears and starts talking about all these different giant tribes mentioned in the Old Testament.
After the flood.
Yeah, after the flood. It uses these accounts like the stories about the Anakim as proof that giants definitely did come back.
Oh, the Anakim. Aren't those the ones the Israelites were so scared of when they sent spies into Canaan?
That's them, the ones who made the Israelites feel like grasshoppers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're described as being incredibly tall and strong. That seems to be the video's main focus. But it's important to remember that they weren't the only giant tribe in the Old Testament. The video mentions the Rephaim, the Zamzumim, the Emim, all sorts of others. It's suggesting that running into giants might have been pretty common back then, like this image of a world still struggling with these larger-than-life beings even after the flood.
Wow, that's pretty wild to think about. And some of the descriptions of these giants are pretty intense.
Oh, yeah.
The video talks about King Og of Bashan, who needed an iron bed that was over 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. I can't even picture that.
Seriously, right.
And it also mentions like a giant with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot.
It's almost like they're trying to create this sense of awe or even fear by emphasizing how different these giants were from normal humans. They even draw a parallel between these biblical giants and figures from Greek mythology.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, like suggesting that stories about cyclops and demigods like Hercules could be based on real encounters with giants.
Whoa, so you're saying those ancient myths might be based on real events from the Bible?
It's a possibility the video puts forward. Like maybe there's a grain of truth hidden within those stories. It definitely makes you wonder if there's more to them than we realize.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay, we've established that the video believes giants existed after the flood.
Right.
But it hasn't really explained how they came back. Does it offer any explanations at all?
Well, it doesn't directly answer the how, but it kind of hints at an explanation by focusing on this idea that the flood was God's way of showing mercy, cleansing a world corrupted by giants.
So God stepped in to wipe the slate clean, but then what? Did he expect humans to deal with any new giants on their own?
That seems to be what they're suggesting. The video connects this divine intervention idea with a call to action for the viewers, urging them to face and overcome their own personal giants.
So he's using giants as like a metaphor. Like we all have our own giants to fight, whether it's bad habits or addictions or whatever challenges we face.
Exactly. The video emphasizes the power of faith and the Holy Spirit to exterminate these personal giants. It's drawing a parallel between the Israelites confronting actual giants in the Promised Land and modern-day believers facing their own struggles.
So basically he's saying God did his part, now it's our turn. But that still doesn't really explain how the actual giants reappeared.
True, it never fully addresses that initial question. It almost feels like it wants us to figure out the mystery ourselves.
It definitely sets us up for a fascinating deep dive. So, what are some possible explanations for the return of giants that the video hints at? Are there any clues, even if it doesn't give a straight answer?
There are definitely a few interesting threads in the video that we can look into. One idea it touches on, just briefly, is the possibility that maybe not all the fallen angels who fathered the pre-flood giants were imprisoned.
Wait, so you're saying some might have escaped or been released later on? That's a pretty crazy thought.
Yeah, it is, and the video doesn't really go into much detail about it, but it definitely raises some interesting questions, like what happened to those fallen angels? What were their motives? And could they have been involved in the reappearance of giants?
Okay, so that's one possible avenue. What other hints or possible explanations does the video give?
Well, another thing it mentions, again, just briefly, is that maybe the post-flood giants weren't direct descendants of angels at all. Maybe there was some other explanation for their existence.
Like what?
Maybe a genetic anomaly or some kind of environmental factor that affected human development.
So like maybe science has a role to play in this mystery.
Exactly. The video doesn't say which scientific explanation might be right, but it acknowledges that there might be more to the story than we currently understand.
I like that. It's like we're combining ancient history and biblical accounts with a bit of scientific speculation. Definitely adds another layer of intrigue to this whole deep dive. So where do we go from here? What other aspects of this mystery should we explore?
It really is amazing how the video blends those different perspectives, grounded in the Bible, but also hints at possible scientific explanations and even ties in ancient mythology.
Yeah, it's like we're supposed to consider the whole giant mystery from all sides, not just accepting one explanation as the only truth.
Exactly. It encourages a much more open-minded approach, which I think is really important when you're dealing with these kinds of topics.
For sure. So let's keep digging into those different angles. We talked about the Anakim, but the video also mentions a bunch of other giant tribes. What can you tell us about those?
Well, each tribe is described with its own unique characteristics and stories, which really adds to the whole narrative. For example, the video tells the story of King Og of Bashan, whose iron bed was supposedly a massive 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide.
Wait, hold on. How big is a cubit again? That sounds gigantic.
A cubit is roughly the length of a forearm, so imagine a bed over 13 feet long and almost 6 feet wide. Try finding sheets for that.
Oh, wow. That's huge. It's hard to even imagine, right? It really paints a picture of just how enormous these giants were supposed to be. But it's not just about their size, is it? The video also talks about how they're portrayed in these biblical stories.
Right, exactly. The video highlights how they're often described as these fearsome and destructive forces, embodying a kind of chaos that God wanted to get rid of with the flood. There's this one line that really stuck with me where it talks about the land eating up the inhabitants thereof. It's got this ominous feeling like the presence of giants brings destruction with it.
Yeah, that's a pretty creepy image. No wonder people were terrified of these creatures.
It really speaks to that primal fear of the unknown, doesn't it? Something bigger and more powerful than us, messing with the natural order of things.
Definitely. So if the flood was meant to wipe out that chaos, that disruption, what does the video say about the giants reappearing? Is it saying that this was all part of God's plan somehow?
It doesn't explicitly say that, but it does focus on the role of God's chosen people in confronting and overcoming these giants. Think about the story of the Israelites entering the Promised Land. They had to fight the Anakim and other giant tribes to claim their inheritance.
You're right. It's almost like the video is comparing those battles to the struggles we face in our own lives.
That's a good point. The video leans into that analogy, suggesting that we all have our own giants to deal with, whether it's bad habits, temptations, or anything that holds us back from living a fulfilling life. And just like the Israelites needed faith and courage to defeat their giants, we need to rely on our own strength and faith to overcome our personal challenges.
So even though it's dealing with this dark and kind of unsettling topic, the video's message is ultimately one of empowerment.
Yeah, it seems to be encouraging people to take action, to face their fears, and not be intimidated by those giants in their lives.
That's a really interesting approach. Using this ancient mystery to connect with people today and inspire them to take control of their lives. But we still haven't really answered that main question. If the flood was supposed to get rid of giants, how did they come back? What other possibilities does the video suggest?
Well, it mentions a couple of things, but doesn't really go into a lot of detail. One idea is that maybe not all of the fallen angels who fathered the pre-flood giants were actually imprisoned.
Oh, so maybe some of them escaped or were let go later and, continued to interact with humans.
Right.
That would explain how giants could come back even after the flood.
Right. It adds a whole other layer to the mystery. It makes you wonder about what happened to those fallen angels, what their motives were, and if they played a part in the giants reappearing.
It's like opening a whole new can of worms.
Yeah.
But I guess that's what makes this topic so fascinating. More questions than answers. What other possibilities did the video mention?
It also brought up the idea that maybe the post-flood giants weren't directly related to angels at all. Maybe there was some other reason for their existence.
Like maybe a genetic mutation or something in the environment that made some people grow to be huge.
Exactly. The video doesn't say one particular scientific explanation is right, but it does say there might be things at play that we just don't understand yet.
It reminds us that even with all the science we have, there are still mysteries out there. Maybe the answer to this whole giant question is somewhere between science and ancient history.
Maybe so. And the video encourages us to be open-minded about exploring those different ideas, blending different perspectives and letting viewers come to their own conclusions.
That's a pretty cool way to approach it, making it interesting from people who take the Bible literally and people who are more open to scientific explanations. There's something in it for everyone to think about.
Yeah, it really makes you realize how much we don't know about our own history. We think we have it all figured out, but then something like this pops up and makes you question everything.
Definitely. It's a good reminder to always keep asking questions, always stay curious. That's how we learn and grow, right? One thing that really stood out to me in the video was the language used to describe dealing with giants. The speaker keeps using the word exterminate, like when he talks about the flood wiping them out, and when he's urging viewers to confront their own personal giants. It's a strong word, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. It is a strong choice of words. And it's not just in this video either. The way giants have been described throughout history often focuses on how monstrous they were, how much of a threat they posed. They're portrayed as something to be scared of, something to get rid of completely.
It's like we have this instinct to divide things into us and them, and giants, with their size and power. They definitely fall into the them category.
Yeah, they really challenge our idea of what it means to be human. They blur the lines between reality and myth, and maybe that's why we're so fascinated by them. They force us to think about our own limits and consider the possibility that there might be more to the world than we can easily understand.
It's almost like looking into a funhouse mirror. You see yourself, but it's distorted and strange in a way that's both interesting and kind of scary.
Exactly. And the video plays with that duality. On one hand, it presents evidence that giants existed, using the Bible and historical texts. But on the other hand, it uses giants as a metaphor for our personal struggles, encouraging us to conquer the giants in our own lives.
It's an interesting way to connect this ancient mystery with things that are relevant to people today. It takes something that can seem really distant and irrelevant and makes it relatable to a modern audience.
For sure. And it does it in a way that makes viewers feel empowered. It encourages them to take control of their lives and face their challenges head on. It's a message that works across cultures and time periods. This idea of facing our fears and overcoming obstacles is a universal theme in stories and myths. And giants, with their size and symbolic power, they make really compelling villains in those stories.
They represent the things that hold us back, the things that try to limit our potential and keep us afraid and feeling powerless.
But the video reminds us that we have the strength to overcome those things. Just like the Israelites defeated the giants in the Promised Land, we can triumph over our own personal giants with faith, courage, and determination.
It's a message of hope and empowerment, urging us to push past our limits and reach our full potential. And it's even more powerful because it comes from a mystery that has fascinated people for centuries.
It speaks to that deep desire we have to understand the world, to figure out its mysteries, and find our place in it all.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of giants, any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I'd say embrace the mystery. Don't be afraid to ask questions, explore different viewpoints, and challenge conventional thinking. The journey of searching for answers is often more rewarding than the answers themselves.
Well said. And who knows, maybe one day we'll actually figure out the truth about giants and how they influenced our world. Until then, stay curious and keep those imaginations open. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been great exploring this fascinating topic with you. Catch you next time.